Some say it's all about 1925 and beyond. The podcast. KC 100 year celebration with Pete A. Kennedy and Marlon A. Kennedy.
Welcome. It's the 1925 and Beyond podcast. Again, I am your host, Pete A. Kennedy, and I am here with the wonderful big brother, Marlon A. Kennedy. And we have, again, another great story coming out on North Street. We have a special guest today, but hold on, let's share the credit. I went to Kingston College between the years of 1995 and started in 1992, played Colts on 93, 94, and then Manning Cup 95. And you'll hear the history in regards to one more, but that's not about us. So let me turn it over to my co-host, big brother, Marlon Kennedy.
All right, welcome everybody. Another episode of 1925 and Beyond. I'm the co-host, Marlon Kennedy. I also went to KINGSTON College from 1986 to 1993. I played cricket at all three levels and captain at all three levels. Our host today, we're very fortunate to have with us Richard Lindsay. Richard is currently the president of the KC Old Boys Association here in Jamaica. We look forward to hearing his story. Our intent is to push as much as possible all of the presidents of the respective chapters so we can get them out there, for they have the reach for us to push this, for us to promote this podcast to show the persons who have been impacted by KC and to spread the word of what we're doing this year in our year of 2025 when KC reaches 100. Richard, hello, good afternoon and welcome.
Good afternoon, Pete.
Welcome,
good afternoon, Marla. All right, let me first thank you guys for this initiative. This is such a fantastic initiative. I think this is going to be something, of course, because it's recording and it's going to be online. So it's going to last forever, pretty much. So it really is a truly great initiative.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you there, Richard. So, like in any true fashion with all our distinguished guests, we want you to tell us your story and start us off with your life before KC, and then with us transition straight into KC and take it from there, Richard.
All right. So here's the thing. I mean, you probably hear this as a recurring message with most of the other persons who you've interviewed. So here's the thing. I was born in south side of Kingston. I was born on a road called Foster Lane, 51 and a half Foster Lane, which is below East Queen Street. I know all of us would know East Queen Street. So that's a kind of recurring thing with KC people. Most of us are born in the quote-unquote inner city of the country. So I was born at Southside Kingston. I went to Alpha Primary School, which you know is on South Camp Road, part of the whole Alpha group of schools. So I went to Alpha Primary School. But this is interesting because most of my family members are Georgian. Yes, most of my family. So from the maternal side of my family, it was just Georges. The maternal side of my family originated on James Street. That is the road, as you would know, just below George, is the one that runs perpendicular below St. George. So that is where my maternal roots originated. So all of my cousins, except for when I started going to KC, all of my other cousins were Georgian. I brought that mold. I guess looking back at life, I think my mom loved KC for whatever the reason. So she kind of instilled this KC thing. And then, of course, you know, the common entrance. And I ended up at KC. You know, for the Marlon, I started KC in 1981, graduated 86, left sixth form 88. So when you were going, Marlon, I was just graduating in 86.
So was it your choice? Was it your choice to go to KC? How does the selection to KC come up when all the other maternal families went to Georges?
Absolutely, man. I mean, absolutely. I mean, in the 70s, coming up in the 70s, you know, school challenge was a big thing. Champs was a big thing. Manning Cup. So all of my life, I'm just hearing and watching school challenge. Well, school challenge was a big part of my growing up life. I mean, Pete, you'd have heard most people at the time is just one TV station. So everybody was watching. Everybody in the country was watching school challenge. We wanted to hear, bar none. You have to be watching school. That's the whole channel. So, I mean, you're watching KC dominating this academic program consistently. It leaves an impression on a young mind. And also champs, which, I mean, to be honest, I wasn't much involved with champs at that tender age, but I'll tell you that school challenge really left that impression for me about KC. So KC was my first choice, and St. George's College was my second choice.
Boy, this as you say, Richard, is a recurring theme, but not only with the fact of where you were born and you grew up, because a lot of the old boys that we speak to, the draw or the allure towards Casey was really the fact that they were winning. They were winning. They knew them from Money Cup champions, boys champions, and also school challenge quiz. So it's good to hear, that this is one of the attraction. And also it was the parents who, in a lot of cases, the mothers who never had anything to do with KC, just saw it as a good institution to send their boys.
Precisely. I mean, it was so prestigious in the 70s to be going to a Kingston College. It was just so prestigious. I can actually remember all the persons in my community who went to KC. I can actually remember them. The boys that I look up to. As a matter of fact, I'm going to share this with you. So in my age group, I mean, it was about 4 of us. Because, I don't, well, Pete might not be aware, but in those days, you had straight high schools and secondary. So if you never made it to high schools, you either end up in a secretary or then you end up at a technical school doing the 9th grade.
I recall.
So I can remember all the boys in my community who ended up passing their common entrance for KC. I mean, it was just a handful of us. And Marlon Campbell, who is the current principal of St. Catherine, was one of my neighbors down. So he was one of the persons in my community, along with myself, who ended up at KC in the time.
It's good to hear. So tell us your journey now when you went to KC. What was it like when you first stepped into the institution, and what were the things that you did? What was life at KC for you?
All right, so I mean, it was fantastic. But hear this, you probably heard this already as well. I never knew there was a second campus.
You only heard about North Street.
Of course, I thought I was going up on.
So don't tell me that day one you end up over North Street.
No, well, I didn't end up at North Street.
Okay.
I think my parents found out quite close to the day, and I ended up at going to Melbourne in the morning, of course. So that was a new dispensation, because I think I was going straight over North Street.
Yeah.
But in it was a great experience in 7th grade. Those days you had shift. So I ended up on the purple shift and never changed. I actually never wore that white epaulette. I wore purple right through. So I ended up in 7 Miller. Great experience. I had some great guys in my class. You may know Philip Ringrose, Pete. He was a good cricketer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that name.
Yes.
Yeah, Philip was one of my classmates. Irvin Banks, who currently manages the Manning Cup, one of the managers, long-time managers in the Manning Cup team, was one of my classmates as well. Quite a few persons who I'm seeing now still involved in KC life, and that makes it interesting, because next year, my year will be celebrating 40 years of graduating KC. And it's so interesting that, I'm still seeing so many people. It's so interesting when somebody posts a grade 7 picture in a group, because we have our 86 score group. And when somebody posts that grade 7 picture, we start to talk about everybody. Such an interesting thing, such a great bond. But life at KC was great. One of the things that stood out to me was when I went in 81. I don't know if you remember, I think it was in 1980. We were banned because of that big fight at Champs in 1980. So when I went in 81, KC was not participating in Champs. I had to wait 2 years actually, because the ban was a 2 or 3 years ban.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. Let me take this call. Yeah. Hear me now?
Yeah, man.
All right. So I had to wait 2 years before I could experience champs. And what was also interesting about this too was that the return of champs was actually at Sabina Park.
Oh,
Because I think stadium was under repair.
okay.
So that champs in '83, I think it was champs was executed at Sabina Park. And it was such an interesting. And you can imagine that's just up the road from the
Yeah, that's in our backyard.
place,
That's in our backyard.
Yeah, man, that's in the backyard. It was a very memorable champs because it was the first and it has been the only time which a last seeded team, because not being in champs for 2 years, meaning we ended up being seeded last, coming into champs for that year, and we end up winning champs. So it was the first in history, and it has never happened before where a last seeded team win champs.
So that was good. That must have been good.
Very memorable.
Yeah,
that was very memorable. Very memorable. Very memorable.
Yes.
So what activities did you participate in at school, Richard?
Okay, I would consider myself, quote unquote, some form of an athlete. I did Pepsi under 13. Then I did high jump and long jump at champs. I think it was maybe in 84, 85 year. And I also played basketball and winning a couple of championships for the school.
Nice.
So I did 3 sports. I represented the school in 3 sports.
Nice.
But I like when the senior old boys speak about how winning their time was, because I like to rub that in with Pete, because Pete could a year him spend at KC, never do much still, but him try a thing. But I like to hear that.
But at least I have 1 win under my belt. There's a lot of man will go through the school and don't have a win. So at least I have 1 win under my belt. So, I'll take one.
Absolutely. But you didn't have a champs win, Pete. You didn't have a champs win, did you?
No.
You didn't have a champs win? You didn't have a champs.
No,
Neither
but we
me.
win. But we win Colts. And I played Colts 93 and Stratton Palmer.
Right.
We went to finals with
Okay,
Norman
good.
Burnley and they beat us 4-love, and we went back 94 under Stratton Palmer again. And we'll beat them this time 4-love again. I mean, not again,
Absolutely.
but in the return we beat them 4-love. So that was my championship under the purple and white. And then again, 95 we went on to Manning Cup and we just never won. So I did have some form of winning during my time, and I was a part of the team at that moment. So I can say that. I have whole heap of friends will go through and I have no winning fish for talk about.
No win. Can I say something now that we're
Of
on
course.
this topic? Can I touch on a topic?
Yeah, man.
So from the vantage point where I sit as president of the OBA Jamaica, it gives me the opportunity to learn a lot about the history of KC, and it also allows me to reflect on KC over the past 100 years. One of the things that I've evaluated, I don't know if you've ever even thought about it, was that the greatest performance period for Kingston College, right, would have been the decade between the 50s, say 1950, to the late 70s, early 80s. In those 3 decades, that's when KC performed the highest at all levels in everything. And it is something that I've been asking myself consistently. Why is it that it is in between the period of 1950 to 1930 we did so well, and we are yet to replicate that level of performance up to this point? I don't know if you have ever thought about it.
No, we haven't. I'm not so au fait and close with the history, but that's good to know. But I'm aware of the big teams that won the triple. Manning, Walker, and Olivia Shield. I'm aware of the
64, 65 team, right?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, I'm aware of the years when we won 14 years straight. But
which is the same period.
Yes.
And I assume it's the same period. Yes. But I've never looked at it like that, Richard. And of course that's good, something to think about as well. But I could easily say that over the years, I guess what has happened is that other schools might have caught up. There's more talent. There's a increase in terms of technology that they use in sports and help other persons to become better athletes.
More schools
then,
are becoming high schools too. So
so I really don't know, but the good thing is that we're still winning as well, but I've never looked at it like that.
But what's your thought?
So here what I
think?
say. So here my thought on it. So yes, I agree. We've moved on. Other schools are catching up. What I will say is that we are KC. Although we are winning, we should be always aiming for that excellent position at all times. So I've given it some thought, and I'm saying, okay, here it is that when the cohort of the past students were smaller, we won more events. So I've always asked, because I'm always in dialogue with people like Neville Oxford, people from that era, that grew up, came up in the 60s. I hung out with these guys a lot. I'll tell you that. And that's where I learned a lot about KC, by sitting with these persons who were 60s and even 50s, because I do talk to Churchill Nita at times. And when I asked that question, the response was, and I'll never forget this, I sat around a table with Neville Oxford, I think a few people, cross-section of between 60s to 70s at the time. And the response was, the reason for KC performing so well in that period, it simply boiled down to the academic staff.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point, because some of the senior old boys that we have interviewed so far, one of the things coming out is that they said that the teachers then were sort of like parents. They looked after them and cared for them. There was that level of closeness and professionalism, and but they said they were like parents. That's one of the big things coming out at that time.
Yes, the quality of the academic staff was very high. Very, very high. I mean, you would have known that Isaac Henry, who really made stats what it was a teacher at KC. The first principal for Monroe, for I think CC, was a teacher at KC.
Yeah. So that is true.
The quality of the academic staff was high.
So after all of that, in terms of your time at KC, before we move into the afterlife of KC, were there any persons that stood out to you in terms of left an impression, as old boys, current students, teachers, administrators, coaches, parents, supporters, anybody that stood out to you, and why was that so? And don't be limited to one person, even though that's how I asked the question, because when we ask these questions, persons usually have quite a few, and usually they apologize for those they would have left off. But let me hear what your take is.
All right. It was probably about 3 or 4 people that comes to mind right now. I will say for sure, my form teacher in 10 McDonald and 11 McDonald, Miss Lewis, who teach me history. Yeah, man, Miss Lewis. I can't forget that lady. That lady really make coming to school and being in class fun. As a matter of fact, she was one of the person really contributing to me history being one of my favorite subject. Really had a great time, Miss Lewis. Nice. Great memories of Miss Lewis. I would say Jono. For sure. Jono left such an impact. I mean, Jono was just the perfect person for communicate with boys of our age. Perfect.
His energy. He had a certain energy about him when he moved around the school as well. So Jono was, man.
Absolutely.
I see him a sweat twin about him.
Yes, man. What?
I don't know if you guys hear this story. I've been told this story quite a few times. There was a time in the 70s, right? This was when Jono was the vice principal at the time. And a lady came, because I don't know if you know that Jono came to KC as a physical education teacher.
I heard he did
sports master. He was actually the sports master. And he was a cricket person, as a matter of fact. He was actually the sportsman, and this man was very involved with laying the pitch and so involved with getting the pitch right and all of that. So there was a story that a lady came in to the school one day asking for the vice principal. And she came into the school and came around and said, Jano on the pitch. And she asked him, and he directed her to the vice principal office, not knowing that she wanted to see him specifically. So he directed her. So when she went up to the vice principal office, now, Miss Douglas was there, Helen Douglas.
Yeah.
So her comment to Helen Douglas was, "Why, Miss Douglas, you have a well-spoken groundsman down here." She couldn't believe it was the vice principal out there on the grounds.
Yeah, man.
You remember John Walk? He had this walk as well. That was distinct when he come.
To me, he stepped short, so it was more indicative. Like the Star Wars is R2D2. What's the one that walk around it?
R2D2.
Yeah, man. He just walk like that. It's just it's just short step. He's not taking a long stride. And he move fast.
Fast.
Yeah, man.
I'll tell you something about Jano too. What is amazing, I think Jano knew all of us by name. Yeah. I'll tell you, I came into contact with Jano maybe about over 10 years after I left school. 10 more than that. And as I stepped in front of him, the man called me by name. It was amazing.
Yeah.
It was just amazing. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Miss Douglas does that as well too, with quite a few.
You're so right.
Few guys that come across Helen Douglas, and them say she call him by name and everything, and even though everybody have them own little intimate story about Dougie and John or whatever, when you speak to them, they may not remember these occasions, but they know you the individual.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Right. So Jono was the second person. I would say Mrs. Lewis. I would say Jono. A third person two more persons left a mark. It's a Ramsey.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you never get caned by Ramsey, you never get caned.
No, but the thing with Ramsey doing is Ramsey he wasn't a big man.
No.
Ramsey was a slender, lean-looking person, but I never get caned in front of him. But my friends them tell me, say, boy, the man hand come down hard.
Yeah, man.
Like it's a pound of cement you feel when you slap.
Juice.
Yeah, man. And who else?
So Ramsey and Woody Miller. Woody Miller, so I went in the period when Woodburn Miller was the principal. Mrs. Hercott was my vice principal, Mr. Bruce, some of the legendary names. And then on my last year in 88, Major Cohen came.
Yeah.
In my final upper sixth form year. That's when Major Cohen came, when I was actually heading out of the school. But yeah, those people left indelible mark. Woodburn Miller, Sir Johnson,
Ramsey, and Miss Lewis.
Absolutely.
Wow. So what was the venture after KC? Was it that you went to university or went into the working world? What happened after that?
Right. So after that, I went to CAST, which is now UTech.
UTech.
Yeah.
Right. So those were the days of CAST. In those days, they tell you that CAST is the practical school and U is the theory school.
Theory school.
Right. So I ended up at CAST doing a diploma in business administration because at the time CAST did not give degrees. So I ended up doing my diploma in BizAd. And then after that, I went to work at NCB on King Street and Barry Street. That's my very first job after finishing CAST in 1991. And the career went after that. Spent 2 years in banking. Then I ended up at Air Jamaica at the technical stores in Air Jamaica out by the hangar. Worked there for 6 or 7 years. And I ended up at the Gleaner Company in 1998 as the circulation supervisor. But you can interrupt and ask questions as we go on.
No, man, go on, man. We want to hear you employing. We're going to ask afterwards, man. Go on.
Okay, so I ended up at the Gleaner Company between 1998 to 2007. Then I actually left the city and ended up... in between that time, I went back because UTech came about and they started offering the first degree. So I went back and added to that diploma and got my first degree in productions and operations management. And then I ended up at St. Anne's Bauxite Partner in St. Anne. That's go by Discovery Bay.
So So I'm glad you reached this point now, because I was just about to ask, or you end up at a bank, to technical stores, to circulation supervisor. So I was trying to see the link, but now that you said that you do your first doing production managing, I could see where you're going with this. Why that trajectory though?
All right, good question, because I was going to preempt you with that. So when I was working at the bank, in those days, bank work was the work. I can remember in the 80s, everybody wanted to
bank
work.
Teller.
Yeah,
bank teller and air hostess and them work.
Well, I'm going to say something to you. I never forget this. I remember the dream salary was $350 a week.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody wanted to work at the bank. So when I got to the bank now and started to work, when I left CAS, and in those days, I mean, you would want to say that work was plenty. I mean, there was no work was just plenty.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent out a canvas of cover letters and resumes to many different organizations. NCB was the first to call me, and I got that job.
Mm-hmm.
However, in those days, people actually would put your resume and stuff on file and then call you after. Not like no. People would actually put your stuff on file. So after my second year in the job at NCB, Air Jamaica came calling, and that was quote unquote another dream job.
The opportunity,
Yes, because in those days, you fly for free, and it is still the case. You work with an airline, you're basically gonna fly for free. So when they called, I went for the interview, and I got the job in technical stores at Air Jamaica. So here I was now switching from out of a shirt and tie formal. As a matter of fact, my first day in the job in the technical stores, I wore a tie. And everybody was asking, saying, but
with a nerd,
we are doing a tie in the warehouse.
Only a KC, man.
So this is a steel toe work, it's a steel toe and jeans. So that's when the switch came now from that sort of business environment to the more production operation. And the truth was that I went into that environment, I really liked it. I really liked the concept of not being formal, and I really liked it. And that's how the trajectory to production and so on changed.
Nice.
So after I went to Bauxite, where next?
So I worked at two different bauxite companies. I started out at Senan Bauxite, then JAMAICA called me. So I was on the North Coast for a few years. Then JAMAICA came along. JAMAICA called and made me an offer, and I took it. So I ended up in Clarendon. So this is a very interesting thing, because most of us would have worked in the city, and there's such a different culture when you work outside of Kingston.
In the country, yes.
Yeah, man, it's a whole different culture.
Yeah.
A whole different culture. It's something that you can get a lesson in it,
But I'm glad you said that, because one of the things I've seen as well with friends is that it probably depends on which parish you work in, but a lot of people, when they go to country, in the long run, they sort of prefer it. Or if they don't remain there, they can sort of put some sort of investment in that location. Then probably might buy a house and have somewhere to retreat to, because they say, boy, it's a different life from the hustle and bustle in Kingston, and you can get all the amenities available there. It's just that it's not just around the corner like when you move from Crossroad to New Kingston to Halfway Tree, but it's still a very peaceful and enjoyable life as well. And back then you never have no rampant crime, so you could have moved around easily in those locations. So my question is, Richard, have you invested in the rural areas?
You hit the nail on the head. That call that I just got while you were on is I have a place that I invested in Longville Park at Clarendon.
Okay.
When I was working at JAMAICA, and I had some issues with my tenant. But and I also did the same in St. Ann when I was down in St. Ann. But you hit the nail on there. You tend to want to invest in these areas if it is nice. But you will experience a level of culture shock, because I'll tell you this: when you come out of the city, the lifestyles are way more laid back. The thing is, Jamaicans overall have a laid back culture. It gets even more laid back when you come out of Kingston.
When you go to the country,
Listen, I will tell you, I'll never forget. One day I left when I was working in at St. Anne's backside, I said I was going to the bank at St. Anne's Bay. This was in the 90s, no, this was in the early 2000s. I went into the bank in St. Anne's Bay. And let me tell you, going into the bank in the country is a whole day experience. There's no urgency. There's no urgency to get you to the bank and get you out. No, it was just, it's like a greeting spot. It's a change of culture. But as you say, Marlon, you hit the nail on the head. Once you get out of the city, you tend to want to invest and you want to have some sort of connection to those places.
So
Well, I imagine.
Go ahead, Pete.
No, I was just gonna say, so, I live in Florida, so I can imagine those who come from the diaspora and come from the rural area and go banking, because in Kingston I feel the same way. So, just representing that side to say that's very interesting to hear. Very interesting to hear. Good stuff.
So, what happened after the bauxite companies, Richard?
So after JAMAICA, I ended up at what I'm doing now in the construction. I'm the territory / sales manager at Jamaica Premix Concrete Limited. So I've been doing that for the past decade. And that basically has opened up the whole construction industry to me. Yes, it has. In a very good way, because I've learned a lot, and I'm going to share this with everybody who will get the chance to listen to this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
When you go the length and breadth of Jamaica, you understand how underdeveloped Jamaica is, right? You get to realize that because we are truly underdeveloped. If you know travel on the North Coast, if you've been traveling on the North Coast for the last, say, 5-6 years, you start to see how the North Coast has blown up.
Yeah.
You would realize this was funny. I was going down to, it wasn't Summerfest. I was going down in December. I was going to a wedding in Mobay. And I spent almost 2 hours moving from where you exit the toll to probably reach not even Discovery Bay, just before Discovery. I was 2 hours in that stretch. And I couldn't remember when I used to drive, and there used to be speed trap on that stretch. Speed trap. No, it's a crawl. So just to cement the point that the development in Jamaica is at a pace that it will never go below what it is. It will only go above going forward.
Yes.
So, in terms of development of Jamaica, there is so much scope for development and the construction industry in Jamaica going forward.
Good to hear. Good to hear. So tell us now, with your current position in terms of your contribution to KC, first of all, you are the president of the Old Boys Association in Jamaica. What led you to vie for that position? What was the decision point for you to take that step? Because that's a big step and that's a lot of responsibility as well. So what led you down that path?
All right. First, I'll start. If I had known it was going to be so much work, probably I wouldn't do it. You said you hit the nail on the head, man. It's a huge responsibility. A huge step. But I will say that I think it was kind of divine at this specific time, because to be the president in the Ojadir, I think it's a special thing. So what led me to do this? I've been back at KC. I came back to KC and started to give back, I would say in my early 40s, maybe 2010. I think 2009, 2010. It was a kind of a serendipitous moment, because I reached the age, generally when you reach 40, you kind of have this feeling come over you, this kind of philanthropic thing. Most people say it. So I said, I think I can give back to KC, and I want to give back to KC. Just around the same time, one of my friends who live overseas had returned, and he was in contact with the coach of the basketball team, who was just about migrating. His papers came through, and he was just about migrating. And because I played basketball, and I said to him I wanted to give him, say, Richard, this may be a good time, because the basketball coach leave and there's nobody. And most coaches at KC, well, most of the unpopular sports are volunteers. So, I said, all right, let me go down there. So when I went down there the evening, I saw his name is Andrew Jackson. He now lives in Florida. And I said, Andrew, I hear him say, yeah, man. Him say, you want the team, Lindsay. I say, all right. I'm not a coach, I'm not a basketball coach, but me know people, me know Marlon Natty, God rest his soul. Marlon Natty was the
Yes.
president of
Yeah.
Jabba.
Yeah.
So I have a good relationship with Marlon, and I know we could get some people for this build a management team around it. And that's what happened in 2010 when I went back. I contacted Marlon Natty. We contacted a man called Dennis Thompson. We got back to a man named Winston Harvey, who, by the way, Winston Harvey coached he's still alive. I think Winston would be 76 or so now. Winston was in basketball from the very first basketball competition started in this country. And he's still around. So I got in contact and we formed the management team, and that's how I ended back at KC. Ended up back in 2010, and I was there. This was a kind of interesting period as well because we had an acting principal with Mr. Burrell at the time, and we were there going. And one of the things that happened for me over the years was I was kind of disheartened, so to speak, by the whole things were going on in general. All different facets of the school life. And I said, what, I think I can make a difference. And this was after me being involved. I became president in 2022. So if I went back in 2010 and it's 2022, I put myself up. So it took all of that time for me to say, I felt this out and I think I can make a contribution to this thing. So at the time, I reached out to a couple of my friends who were directors on the New York board, and I say, guys, I feel I want to challenge. And at the time, this was after COVID. As a matter of fact, COVID was 2020.
Yeah.
So there was a kind of, after Donovan White came into the seat in 2019, he resigned by 2020. Then there was a kind of a void between 2020 to 2022.
Correct. I remember.
And that's right. So that's on the time I said, let me put myself up and see. And that's how it happened. I put myself up, and in 2022, I was elected. A very interesting election in the chocolate, I might add. But I got elected, and my executive got elected as well.
Nice. Congratulations. Good stuff. Good stuff.
Marlon, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was on mute. Yeah, but it's good to hear that. So what are the things that we're doing now? What are the most recent achievements since you've been there, and what are the plans for this year or for our 100th anniversary?
All right. So one of the things, a very important thing I must share with you at this juncture of the interview is that the local OBA, it's not a chapter. All the other 8 that is outside of the country are chapters. Local OBA.
We have been so educated, Richard.
Right.
We have been educated that. So I'm very mindful. I'm not called you the chapter. I'm saying
right. I realize.
KC Old Boys Jamaica.
Right. So
that's how I address so
this is important to know.
Organization. Yeah.
This is important to note because we are on the ground and we should be kind of like the guiding light for all the other chapters, right? So there really should be a unified structure with us guiding this ship called the ACOBA ship. And it is very important. Why? Why is it important? It is important, for example, now we have this kind of silo type operation where things are being replicated and efficiency is not being attained in our efforts to help KC. And it's not because anybody is clandestine or anything like that.
Or trying to grandstand or show up anybody. It's just people just doing their thing.
Right. So that is the whole purpose of an organization. So in 1933, the bishop, visionary, founded the Old Boys Association because he understood after forming KC that the only person who's going to help KC to grow is going to be people who get the experience. Because nobody else not going to do it. It's a school for poor boys who don't have nothing. So nobody now look out for them. So it's going to have to be the persons who pass through is going to take care of it and help it grow. Now, what in my assessment, what has happened is that platform and structure that was laid because of the years of different alumni. Now we're 100 years. We have so much alumni that has passed, and we've grown outside of Jamaica. We need to know to look at the platform or the organization itself and design an organization to facilitate us where we are and where we want to go. So as it is now, that's one of the big focus that I'm having now. You spoke to the other presidents. I don't know if they mentioned we now have a president circle.
Yes, they did.
Yes,
they did.
Right. So now
They
we're
did,
now
yes.
meeting constantly. So
Yeah.
the whole purpose is to now get the organization structure to match where the organization is and where it is going.
yes.
So that's a big part of my function.
And we pick that up when we speak to because we've spoken to earlier here with Wayne Fraser, what's his Winston Stewart.
Yes.
And we
legendary Winston Stewart.
We have a few others lined up from the chapters.
Dins.
But one of the things coming out is that, yes, there is that coordinated effort as well. So even when we spoke to Michael Vassiana, who is the chairman, he himself sort of directed me to say, make sure you speak to even Patrick Dallas to make sure that, as part of the whole planning, that I'm not doing anything that crosswise with whatever is happening. So I spoke to Patrick and we're good to go with what we're doing here. So it's good to hear that. So we're not repeating with efforts. It's not a grandstand thing. It's a coordinated effort. And we can get more value out of that, more strength towards that as well.
Yes.
And achieve more in the long run.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Resources will be used more effectively and more efficiently. So as it is now, we have established our office, the OBA office, which is the office of all the OBA whenever they come to the country, is in the Douglas Forest building, where we have started the office. We are just getting in some other equipment like our machines, but furniture is all in there. Everything is in there. So we've established the office. Now, one of the things that we want to start to do now is to consolidate all the scholarships so that this office can be the place where we can have all our data, all our source of information. So we don't have to be pressing teachers or pressing the school to give us data on individual performances. All these data will be held in this office, data on everything. And that's the intention.
No,
to hear
that. This office, right? As you see, we just got our shirts right out of the actual bookstore, right? Yeah. And we heard of the stones and all these things. And I'm coming down in March again because we're doing some work there. Is the office open for visit? Let's have a tour and let's show the people the office.
Absolutely, the office is open for visit. One of the other things that myself and my executive is trying to establish is a junior old boys association. Sorry, a junior old boys association. What is the junior old boys association?
Yeah, tell me more.
Hold on, Richard. It sounds like you're going to discriminate with the age, you know.
No.
Tell me more.
There's no this. As a matter of fact,
old boys and you have older boys.
No, here it is now. What is happening is that a lot of boys may not see themselves as well. But that's not it. The fact of the matter is, from your leave KC, you're an old boy.
You're an old boy, that's true, yeah.
You're an old boy. From your leave, even if you're 16, 17, from your leave, you're an old boy. Now, what we're trying to do is to have a junior OBA. The junior OBA will target those people leaving fifth form, lower upper six. The purpose of it is to encourage and to introduce the work of the OBA, so that when these boys leave, they will have a greater understanding of the purpose of the OBA.
Yeah.
Right. So, because what I find is that most persons like myself will wait until their late 30s, 40s before they really get back into KC life. And KC really need us to be involved right through. You don't have to be giving money, It's about giving mentorship. It's about coming back, giving you support whenever it's required. So the junior OBA, it will intentionally introduce the work of the OBA to these persons at this tender age, so that when they leave, they will understand. And also, the fact of the matter is, a presence on the school for the OBA is so important, because at the end of the day, this is the factory for the Old Boy Association.
And here, and I like,
like
you
that.
said that because here what I'm seeing now, I would see that it's probably easier for the younger set to connect with those that are there now, and to just let me confirm something, because my understanding of an old boy is once you have graduated fifth
Correct.
form, good.
Correct.
So
Correct.
you could technically, in
farmers.
theory, you could say that sixth formers are old boys.
Absolutely. That is why
Good,
we are calling it the
good.
junior OBA. That's
Okay.
exactly what it is. That is
Okay,
why we are
excellent.
saying that's when you are a junior old boy, when you
Okay,
are in sixth
good.
form.
Good.
Because
All
I
right.
just say, if once you graduate, you're pretty much
Yeah.
technically an old boy.
Yeah, man.
You
So
know,
in
and
addition, the incorporation would start with those six farmers, OBA and ABAs.
absolutely. And what would happen is that that sixth form will be mandated to at least start to register all of the persons in fifth form and keep that database. So once people have left, we will each year have a database of persons that we can follow up on and encourage to be involved in
I like that, because then when they move and disperse all over the world, then you can say, yo, you know, say a KC alumni there, Florida, one Tampa, one
Absolutely.
did this, one did that. Because
Absolutely.
we've heard stories of KC old boys, so they never know a KC old boy organization exists
In
right up
Tampa.
the corner from them and all these
There you
things.
go.
So that I really love that idea, because I must say we tried it here in South Florida, right? And it just didn't work. Because it's just one KC. But I see it working in Jamaica, because
Exactly.
as you say, that is the factory, that's the hub, that's the headquarters. So
Exactly.
having that there is also a great way of the old boys doing that mentorship and bringing them through. So I support that 100%, man. Good idea. Good idea.
Right, and letting them know where we are all over the world. So
Yeah.
once you're
Yep.
gonna go somewhere, you can say, okay, you can connect with. If you're going to New York and you're doing school, here is an organization over there where you can get some support from if you need help. So and so, if you're going to Tampa, and so that's the whole thinking behind.
And a more personal note, because I remember that Pete lives in Florida now. And it was me who come up from Jamaica, carry Pete go Florida chapter.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't
Right.
aware of it. And in his mind as well, to Richard, he assumed it's just pure big man and old man. And
No, so let me tell you how it go.
Let me
tell you how it go, and we talk about it right from that. So we went, it was kept at Audley Hewitt's office at the
Right.
time. And when I went in there, everybody I start mention the year they graduated, and that was like 20, 30 years before I born.
Exactly.
So, like you said, the connection was missing. And that's Marlon.
No,
I didn't go back.
exactly.
I didn't go back for years. And the South Florida know that. So big up my South Florida chapters, Dr. Wayne Fraser. They knew that. So then what happened is that, like you said, it's after years of me maturing, and I'm like, no, I have to give back. It's then I said, okay, I gotta go back into the circle now, build the connection, start to add value, and then now me and some of the other guys say, yo, let's start bringing some of the other guys by doing other activities in the community that's a KC, but we weren't separating to say young KC. So that's the piece of the journey that's why I say I connect to it, because that was my history. But me no go back.
Exactly.
I tell you, Mr. Lindsay, I go to I say, look here, that no, it doesn't connect. But they have all the things that they wanted to do, and matter of fact, they still doing and enhancing those things. It's just I never saw somebody in the room that I could connect to. So that would help, because then when you say, all right, you know, South Florida, there's a little boy that just graduating and him live around the corner. Them are gonna send me, them are gonna send Smooth, them are gonna send Bogle. These are the younger guys to connect with them, to say, all right, come into the circle. So I love that. I want to say, I'm looking forward to it.
When I add to it, you know, it's
Why,
funny.
Richard?
Sorry, it's
young is relative, you know. Pete said they must send the younger guys. But me understand where you must.
No, Richard, not to cut you, Richard, right? Here's something that I want to, just a suggestion. Every time I come to the school, and this is just me, because I have the relationship with Mr. Myrie, you know, slip into the office, etc. I want to suggest that one of the things that the Jamaica OBA can do is set up a schedule that has a returning KINGSTON College old boy, and you're visiting the island, you can get to come in and sit in this space and probably meet the principal, or probably meet somebody of staff, or get a tour of the school. And you know, because you know, a lot of I've heard the old boys say, boy, I don't know if you go and who to talk to, because I'm just not gonna just walk through the gate. So just wanted to throw that out, that would be a great tip to say, hey, you know what, if you're in the island during this time, we're connecting.
But Pete, that can only happen if you are connected through the OBA, Pete. They can't just walk in because remember the OBA has that link with the school and everything. So old boys who are not connected would find that more difficult. Those who are connected through the OBA know who to talk to and when to turn up.
But what happens is this
so that reinforces that point. But anyway, Pete, anyway.
No, but we'll have man be about podcast conversation. We'll have a KC we are talking about. So
Richard, the man take away your thing, Richard.
No, but a KC we are talking about. What I'm saying is this. You see the young lady that sit downstairs in the office, right? What I'm saying, Richard, is when a KC old boy shows up, that's more times, because that's some of the guys them tell me that. So when they go to the office and say, hey, I'm a KC old boy, she could say, hey, you know what, here's a number or here's a calendar to say, hey, you can come back at this time because this is what's happening around the association. So through Jamaica, them still get a connection to wherever they reside.
I take your point. That's a great point. That's a great point. I take your point, Pete. What I would say is, and this is also where the junior OBA comes in, because the intent is to have the junior AB man that office during school hours, after school hours. That's the whole purpose, to have the six farmers manning that office.
Yes.
So the point is well taken.
All right. So what are the plans for 2025 now, Richard?
All right, so for 2025, we are now working with the Centenary Steering Committee. As you would have known, that there are some items on the agenda for Founders Week. So I sit on the Centenary Planning Committee, and we are now planning for all of those events that are to come in that week and other events that are to come further on in the year. As well as we as an OBA, we have our fundraising events that we are mandated to carry through every year. So we are in the planning of those events. And let me tell you, it is a lot of work. I want to step back to the point that you mentioned about the gap, the age gap in the OBA. Mm-hmm. It's funny because this is the reason why, that was the reason why a Fortis pavilion evolved.
Yeah.
A Fortis pavilion evolved because of that age gap where the older OBA boys could not, there was no connection with the younger old boys. And also, I'm not showing no barbs here, but when you're young, you kind of tend to be more impatient. You want things to happen faster. And the old boys were moving at a much slower pace.
Yes.
So the young guys could not deal with it, and they probably interpreted that situation as a lockout, when in truth and in fact it was not a lockout.
True.
It may have been just the fact that people moving at different pace, people with different priorities, and they're dealing with things differently. So when I assess it, I think that same thing was the cause for the pavilion to evolve, which the pavilion evolved because of a reason. Mm-hmm. Because of a reason. So we have to accept the pavilion, and we do. So that is why, here in Jamaica, when I assess the last 24 years, say since the turn of the millennium, I assessed it, and I have seen where and how the OBA has kind of fallen off here in Jamaica. And you ask about what I'm doing, what we're doing for the future, what this executive is doing. This executive is working very hard. We were registered as a limited liability company in 2004. So the OBA Jamaica is actually a limited liability company.
Nice.
We are bringing the limited liability company up to date. We are constituting it correctly with the Companies Office of Jamaica. We are registering with the Department and Cooperative of Friendly Societies. So those things are important to get the organization as a proper entity, a proper body.
No, and to be taken seriously as well.
And to be taken seriously. Yeah. So we come to our AGM reporting to our constituents. Mm-hmm. And also, this is one of the things why, maybe you look and say, Florida may be way more ahead of the OBA Jamaica, New York, maybe Toronto. And the reason why they are ahead is because they have been operated as an incorporated entity for a very long time. And they have to operate, and they've been operating in that mode. No, we are just trying to get that out. And that is what we are bent as an executive. My executive is bent on ensuring that when we step away, that structure is there, And not only the structure, a database and a whole systematic way of operating exists. So when we step, the other set of executives can just step right in and pick up where we left off.
Nice work. Nice work.
Well, Richard, it's glad to hear that. It's glad to hear the progress that is being made in true fashion as we close out this podcast, because it's really very interesting and I'm really enjoying this one. And there are more things we need to discuss, but probably off the air. So we're going to ask you to one, wish KC happy 100. Two, leave a positive message for the current student body and anybody that will be listening to this podcast later. And three, details in terms of the Old Boys Association, in terms of website, social media handle, and so forth. If you can just leave that with us right now, please. Go ahead, Richard.
All right. So, of course, I want to wish KC a happy 100 year. We, the Old Boys, as it is, the current Old Boys, must work hard to add to the foundation that has been laid in order for another 100 and odd years be built on that foundation. Strengthen the foundation and strengthen the decking to add another 100 years and beyond. My message for the current student body and anybody who is going to listen to this podcast afterwards as young persons is that what is important in my mind is to, as early as possible, find what your purpose in life is. And I'll say this, what I've encountered and what I have uncovered is that your passion is your purpose. So whatever you're passionate about, that is what you're here for. So, you know, a lot of young persons, because of what is in the media and, you know, what people are saying in terms of what you need to do for money and all of that. Yes, money is important because money will make your life comfortable. However, I will say that once you're passionate about something and you're doing it with everything, money is going to come once you're doing it properly.
Come on.
Right? So that is my message for the younger generation at KC, Old Boy. Your passion is a purpose. Find out what you're passionate about and make that your career.
Yeah.
There you have it, the Kingston College OBA of Jamaica, Mr. Richard Lindsay, the history man. That's what I would say. He drops some nuggets in regards to dates and times and how things take place. And the man who broke the spell of St. George's High School in his maternal family and say, hey, I'm going over to Kingston College, purple and white. Thank you for that, sir. We appreciate it. But it's the first I've heard this one. In 1993, the KC Old Boy Association was birthed by the great master who felt that it's only KC boys can
1933.
No, in 1933.
1933.
Yes.
Thank you for the correction. So probably because I noted it here. And that was where individuals like all three of us on this podcast have the opportunity to give back. He played Pepsi football, track and field, and basketball, and today leads the mantra right there in Jamaica for us KC Old Boys. Thank you, sir. We appreciate you. End this podcast without doing what we normally do, and that is to say the greatest motto of all time, and that is the KC motto. You know how it goes, sir, because you have to, right? And it starts like this. Fortis. Cadere. CEDRE. Non-Potest. The brave may
fall, but never
yield.
See you again on the next episode. Thank you again, sir. We appreciate you and welcome. And we'll see you on the 1925 and Beyond podcast. Cheers from the Fortis people.